So I have to admit that the biography I'm going to read of Senator Nelson came straight from his website because it was so good. I didn't want to change any of it. And it really was right on point for our topic today. It said, in 1986, Senator Nelson launched into space and spent 6 days orbiting the Earth aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. Nearly 3 decades later, he still vividly recalls looking back at our planet from the window of the shuttle and not seeing any political, religious, or racial divides. From that perspective, you can see how we're all in this together, he says. If we could just remember that, we'd sure get a lot more done. It's that kind of perspective that has earned Bill a reputation as a thoughtful, moderate voice in an increasingly partisan political world. Nelson's public service career began in 1972 with his election to the Florida legislature. He then served 6 terms in the U.S. Congress representing Orlando and the Space Coast, becoming an early champion of the environment. In 1994, Nelson was elected to the Florida cabinet as state treasurer, insurance commissioner, and fire marshal. During his 6 years in the post, he showed common sense problem solving, and he was a strong consumer advocate. Nelson was first elected to the U.S. Senate in November 2000. He's someone who thinks public service is a noble calling, which is why he's devoted his life to serving his community, his state, and his country. We're very pleased to welcome him here today.
Thank you. And it was during that time in the House that I had the privilege of serving with Tom Lantos. By the time he came to the House, Tom had already become a leader in human rights issues, and he co-founded the Congressional Human Rights Caucus in 1983, and he introduced legislation that had enormous influence that spanned the globe. Let me give you an example. Tom led the charge to criticize the government of Iraq over the treatment of Kurdish refugees. He supported democracy and human rights in China. He was deeply concerned about ethnic Albanians living in Yugoslavia. And on the subject of anti-Semitism, Tom's voice was one that everybody listened to. He condemned acts of anti-Semitism wherever, from the former Soviet Union to the United Nations, using every tool that he had. And whether through many acts of Congress that he passed, or through fiery speeches, or through hearings, briefings, whatever it was, no one dared to challenge him on the subject because he knew what he was talking about. And sadly, we lost Tom's voice 6 years ago. It wasn't just a loss for his family and his friends. It was a tremendous loss for human rights defenders around the world. And the causes that Tom championed continue to challenge us this very day. As he rightfully feared, ignorance remains rooted in societies of even our closest allies. Tom put it best, and I'm going to quote from a floor speech in 2005. Quote, "The lessons of the Holocaust are crucial today because once again we are witnessing against Jews and other minorities the same process of delegitimization and dehumanization that paved the way to destruction." He continued, "Let us not forget the brutal extermination of a people began not with guns or tanks, but with words. systematically portraying the Jew, the other, as less than legitimate, less than human. And today you've heard much more on these trends from the other speakers here. They are the experts. But what is emerging is clear. We all need to do more to reverse and eradicate such human brutality. Now, maybe there's a little optimism. Take, for example, and often what used to happen first in California, it seems now, if it happens first, it happens in my state of Florida. You heard of the pastor in Florida who made himself a name by burning Korans. He seemed to think that he found a way to combat radical Islam by matching hatred with hatred. Well, he was coming to the little town of Mulberry, Florida, to the east of Tampa. And a group there invited him to carry out this stunt on their property. And so a small group of Mulberry residents, Mulberry, Florida, mobilized. And they met and they barnstormed how could they dissuade the pastor. So they started a Facebook group called Not in Mulberry, Pastor Jones, which quickly received quite a few likes. And the group's main organizer asked the fundamental question: why come to our town and stir up the pot of hate and division? So why some optimism? If a few people in Mulberry, Florida stood with that organizer and stood with them instead of with the pastor, it gives me hope that the forces of tolerance can indeed outnumber the forces of division. The residents of Mulberry give us this hope. And when we challenge hatred together, we can have an impact. By the way, we can start right here in our own politics on the division that is going on in this country. And it's one of the things that Tom believed in. It's something, if he were here today, he would ask us to do more, which is to bring people together, to find the common bonds of decency in each of us and bring us together as a people, as a human race. And so, as one of the people who loved Tom Lantos, who admired him, how he would go home every weekend all the way to California and work his constituency, who would take the red eye on Sunday night coming back and change clothes as he changed planes in the St. Louis airport so that he was ready to step off the airplane in Washington and go to work. Let's use his example of what we should do today. Thank you.